They're just arbitrary name-value pairs, but they also are assigned to a path. So as you're browsing through a website, they're assigned not just to any part of the website, but to subsections of the website. So, for example, CGI bin programs might want cookies, so you might assign a cookie for CGI bin that wouldn't be added to requests to other parts of the website. There's also the domain. A lot of cookies are set to often like Google.com will apply to any of the websites in Google.com, or it might just be mail.google.com that a cookie is assigned to. They're also given expiration dates. So the server tells the browser how long to keep it for. Persistent cookies it can keep for a day, a year, 10 years, whatever. The non-persistent cookies, the ephemeral cookies, are just given for that session. As soon as you close the browser, all those cookies are gone. So here's an example of a packet capture of an HTTP header. Yeah, up above is post, and there's a URL. There's all the normal stuff you'd see in a header, and I've highlighted the cookie information. And so this is typical. This is from Gmail, and it has lots of information that it wants to know about me, and it just tells me, hey, repeat this information. Some of these fields are the logon session IDs. And that's sent by this one was sent by the client to the server. The server then sends back other set cookie commands saying, hey, here's some more cookie information that when you make requests, please add to your requests. So here's how I can clone your browser. What I'll do is I'll run a sniffer that captures all the URLs and the cookies. I can do this manually just by copying and pasting and stuff. I can use like the browser import feature in like Mozilla to import cookies. So I can do it kind of manually. It's kind of a pain. But I can also run some code that does it. Run one bit of code that sniffs the network and finds all the cookies and URLs. Then write a proxy server that will then overwrite all the cookies. So that when I log into Gmail, the browser sends the cookies it thinks it has already, but the proxy says, no, I've got some new cookies for you. So if I sniffed your Gmail connection and got all your cookies and attached them to my Gmail session, I now become you. I clone you. And you can clone yourself. Just open up two browser windows with Gmail, and you can see you can run two browser windows at the same time. And there's no way for the server to really know that you're running two browser windows with Gmail, or that I'm running one browser window and you're running another one. It's especially if we're behind the same BlackHat network access point. We have the same IP address as far as the server is concerned. So you can think of it like with snort rules. So a lot of us, everyone raised their hand about snort. So here's some snort rules that can find cookies. So you dump them to a file, then you can write a little squid proxy that reads that file and applies those cookies, that data. So this is the mess of what we're saying, is if you're a lazy hacker and you don't want to go through the work, just write a few little tools, and you can do this. The big message about this is that you have like Tim O'Reilly talking about Web 2.0 and how it's going to change the face of the Internet. But Web 2.0 hasn't solved this problem that we've known about for 30 years about sniffing traffic. Every hacker knows that one of the first things they do when they break into a corporation is run a sniffer to get some passwords off the wire and other interesting things off the local network wire. So all these Web 2.0 application vendors like Google Mail, Yahoo, Hotmail, MySpace, Facebook, there's a ton of them, they all have ignored that. So they are all have these applications for you that have just ignored the fact that people can sniff it. So the upshot is any time that you go to a website that asks for a login name and a password and then forwards you to an unencrypted connection, that's a connection that someone like me, or any of you, by the way, I'm putting my tools on our website, any of us can then just hijack. So Web 2.0 is now fundamentally broken. The same is to be thought of the Wi-Fi access points. Is like the BlackHat access point we have here today is open. You can actually create access points that are more secure. So there are options in like WPA that we can create sessions that are encrypted on a one-on-one basis. So you can hack up a Wi-Fi access point with a radius server that always says, yes, that person's allowed. So no matter what username or password you enter in, you're automatically allowed. So they're not really authenticating you, but they're giving you an encrypted connection to the access point. So there are ways of setting up public access points that anyone can log into, yet which will be encrypted with WPA. So that's a big thing. You have cities these days in the United States. I think Ohio or some state just recently announced is like doing a statewide rollout of public Wi-Fi. And they're rolling out public Wi-Fi unencrypted to their citizens. And this is a huge problem. So now, the government, they said it's okay to have public Wi-Fi that's unencrypted, so therefore I must be safe. And of course, the government is wrong. So here's my tool that I've written. I wanted to make it a little bit easier to have like a nice little self-installing thing, but unfortunately, I'm not gonna have that. So I've got two tools, Hamster and Ferret. Hamster is the proxy server that reads cookies from a file. Ferret is this tool I wrote a while back that writes cookies to a file. So here's how you'd run it: is you would go to the command line and run Ferret. You'd have to figure out which adapter you're sniffing. And then dump all the cookies to a file. Then you have to configure your web browser to go through the proxy. So you go through your standard configuration to say go through a proxy. Because a proxy server, the Hamster proxy server, is going to overwrite your cookies for you. So Ferret saves the cookies, Hamster reads the cookies. This is an example of the file that's produced. So Ferret's going along producing a file that looks like this. It's pretty simple. It just includes URL information and or cookie information. One of the key things is that it has to save the state per IP address. So there's 100 people here on the Wi-Fi access point. I can only clone one person at a time. I was talking last night with Adam Shostak, and he mentioned cookies are valid for years. Google had this issue a while back where they're just making their cookies never expire, essentially. And so people didn't like that, so now Google agreed to allow them to expire after 2 years. But I haven't had a chance to test this out about how long I can actually have a capture file, like a sniffer capture file, and then come back to it a month later. But in theory, a lot of websites should have this, that I can come back a month later and then hijack that account. Which means you can sniff the wireless network right now at BlackHat, then go home, download the Hamster utility and Ferret utility, process the capture file, run it through Hamster, and then hijack people's accounts that were logged in today. So that's why I actually plan on testing. So when you run Hamster, it's a proxy server. You take your browser, it goes to the proxy server, and you type in the URL Hamster. It's a special coded thing in the thing. What it will give you is a list of IP addresses that it's found. So I can click on any one of those IP addresses, then clone that session. When I clone the session, I'm now that person as far as the websites are concerned. So I list the URLs that I found. The reason I have to list the URLs is the URLs themselves often contain unique strings that I need to know. I can't access the website unless I know that unique identifier. I can also, in Hamster, click on what the cookie information is. There's some interesting things you'll find here. For example, favicon.ico. When I read the cookie information on the wire, I saw it being sent with that request. However, the cookie probably isn't assigned to that file. It's probably just assigned to the root directory. So that's the problem with this tool is when you run something, you gain access to an account, you've only got actually part of the cookie information because not all the cookies are being sent in the right location. And we'll see that when I do the demo. So oftentimes, I don't even need the URLs, though. I can just click like on mail.google.com/mail. So if I've got your Google account cookies, I can just type in the URL of where I want to go without having to click on it. So here's, by the way, why the program sucks. There's no install program, so you got to do all this installation process manually. It screws up your browser. So when you use your browser for this, you get all sorts of strange cookies, and it kind of screws it all up. So I'm using Internet Explorer in my demo because I use Mozilla as my main browser. I don't want to screw up my main browser, so I use a different browser. It crashes or hangs sometimes, so when I do the demo, I'll probably have to restart it. And you actually saw earlier in the previous thing that the program crashed while it was running in the background. For some reason, sometimes I can't read from the text file to restart both processes. Another reason why it sucks is that tracking the URLs are confusing. What I've found is, while I know in theory that I can just copy the URLs and the cookies and go to those sites, in practice I get all sorts of crappy URLs and I have to find which one it is I'm supposed to click on. So I need to write some software that goes through and says, okay, ignore the GIFs and the images. For certain websites that I know about, like Yahoo, reconstruct the proper URL that's like at the top of the Yahoo mail tree. Even though I don't see that one go across the wire because they logged on before I started, I can reconstruct it for what I am seeing going across the wire. So I need to add that sort of stuff. As I mentioned, the cookies are in the wrong place sometimes. So I've seen in a subdirectory a cookie being used, but I'm not sure that it's supposed to be used for any access to a higher level directory. And that's a common problem. It doesn't support SSL. As I mentioned again, it needs an install program. I mentioned this twice because from where this tool is, we can use it because we're techies that like to use command line programs and stuff. But if we want to really make a nice, easy to use version, it needs to have an install program. So now let's do a demo, and let's see what we can do. So I had Ferret running during the demo, and I had Hamster running. Ferret crashed, so I'm not getting any new cookie information, but I saw these websites while that's what Ferret found while I was doing the first part of the presentation. So by the way, I hope I'm not outing anybody, because that tends to happen during these presentations. So these are just the, better thing over there, the URLs that it found that people were surfing. So I'm hoping to find one that had like Google Mail. Okay, so this guy here looks like he was using Google Mail. So what I've done here is by clicking on this, each time I clicked, I cloned that person. So I reset the proxy settings so I'm that person, so all their cookies. So when I click here, these are the cookies that I have. But when I click, who's that person? Was that one? When I click here, these are the cookies that I have. So each time I click, I change personalities. So let's type in mail.google.com/mail. By the way, another thing why my proxy server sucks. I don't really want to out anybody, so I should have had my finger over that minimize button before I did that. So what happens at that point, I'm not seeing what he's typing. Like if he's composing a message, I'm not seeing that. If he posts a message, I'm not seeing that in the proxy. What I have is just an access as if he had a second window open, which means I can send email from his account, I can reset some of his settings, I can go through and click one by one all of his email, and I can not change the password.